I love getting emails from those of you who are watching these videos at lynda.com. And for years, I've gotten emails from people who say, gosh, I love Joomla. I love the way the menus work, but I really want drop-down menus. And I've always had to write back and say, go download a third-party extension for that. Now that we've got drop-downs built into Joomla and built into the Protostar template, I know some of you are going to be very happy about that we have drop-downs now that show up here across the page. But I also know that some of you are now going to say, oh, by the way, I really love the way we had it in the old days. I don't really want drop-downs. What I'd like to have is I'd like to have this main navigation go across the top. And when you click on something like news and information, over here on the right side of the screen, I'd like to have some sub-navigation show up here rather than having these drop-downs. And I'd like to turn the drop-downs off altogether and just have this sort of split navigation. So the main navigation across the top, the sub-navigation down on the side of the page. How can I possibly configure that? Well, you can still configure that, and you don't have to have these drop-downs if you don't want them, and that's what I'm going to show you in this particular video. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into the back end of Joomla, and I'm going to start by making a new menu module. And this menu module will show up on the right side of the screen to show you that sub-navigation. So I'm going to start by going to Extensions, Module Manager. And remember that the module manager is the way that these menus display on the website and where they display. The module can also specify what part of the menu you want to display. You do not want to go into the menu manager and make a whole new menu. If you go into the menu manager and you make a whole new menu, call it the About Sub-Navigation menu, two problems happen. First of all, you run the risk of making duplicate content on your website. So you're making links to pages that already exist on your website. But the second thing that will happen is if you happen to be using the breadcrumb's located right here on the front end of the website. Let me go down into, let's say, the press releases page here. This breadcrumb that's currently reading home, news and information, press releases, which accurately reflects the information architecture of this website. If you create a sub-navigation called press releases, you set up a whole separate menu for that, you display it on the right side of the screen, this breadcrumb will only read home press releases. It won't read correctly. In order to keep from making duplicate content, what we're going to do is use our module as a filtering device to just show portions of the menu that we want to have displayed on our pages. So here inside of the module manager, I'm going to click on my new button to make a new module. And I'm going to go to my menu item here because that's, of course, the kind of module that I want to make. I'm going to give this a title. I'm just going to call this Sub-Navigation. I'm not going to show that title, though. Nobody needs to see Sub-Navigation on top of the links. The position I want this to appear in is on the right side of the page. So I'm just going to pick right here from the list. And under Basic Options, let's make sure that we're displaying the right menu. I want to display the main menu. So let's just see what we've got so far. If I go ahead and hit Save, and I refresh my page here, I'm just going to go back to Home. So now I have the navigation going across the top of the page. I have that same navigation over here on the right. When I go to the About portion of the web page, you can see that I have some sub-navigation here. That's not really what I want. What I want to have happen is when I'm on the home page, I don't want to see this module over here at all. And when I go to the About page, what I want to see is just executives and company structure. Okay, so let's tweak this just a little bit more. So first of all, let's control what pages this sub-navigation will show up on. We can do that through the Menu Assignment tab here. Right now, this is set to show on every page of the website. What I'd like to do is I'd like it to show on every page of the website except for the ones I'm going to select. So if I choose this, by default, all of the pages are selected, which would mean that it would display on none of the pages of the website. A little bit confusing. So what I want to do is say select none to deselect everything. So I want this module to display on every page of the website except for, I don't want it on the home page on the footer. I don't want it on the login page on the footer. I don't want it on the home page on the main menu. But for the other pages that exist right now, I'd like it on all of those other pages. So let's go ahead and say save again. And let's see how that's affected things. So if I go back to my home page, I no longer see that menu module. And if I go to the About page, I now have the full navigation. So I've got Home, About, News and Info, as well as my sub-navigation. So I need to make one more tweak. I want to just see those links, executives and company structure. I don't want to see the other stuff. And that's possible here inside of our menu module under basic options. So if we go here to basic options, what we have here is our base item is current. Whatever our current page is, that's where we're going to start from. We could, of course, specify this as any of the particular menu items here, and that would show, for example, let's say the news and information, sub-navigation on the About Us page. Really, really confusing. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. So I think current is probably a great setting for this. But our start level is level 1. So in other words, start at the main navigation and then end by displaying all of the navigation that occurs underneath. What I actually want to have happen is start at level 2, start at the sub-navigation, and then display any third level or fourth level navigation I have. I don't have any for this website, but you might for yours. So I'm going to set this to level 2 and say save one more time. And now what happens when I refresh this page? I get just executives and company structure within the About portion of the website. When I go to News and Info, I get Solar Blog and press releases. And when I go to Products, I get my sub-navigation over here as well, which is exactly what I want. And when I go back to the home page, I don't have it. The last thing you might want to try doing is maybe you feel like these drop-downs are a little bit repetitious because right now you're going into the About page, the sub-navigation's over here. Maybe you don't want these drop-downs anymore. How do you get rid of them? Well, here's what you do. I'm going to hit Save and Close to get out of my sub-navigation module. And I'm going to click on my main menu module. And in here, what I'm going to change is, under my basic options, right now I've started with level 1 and I'm ending with level all. What I'm going to do is I'm going to not show my submenu items. Remember, that will turn off the drop-down except on the pages. So if I'm on the About portion of the website, I'll see the drop-down. But if I'm on the Products portion of the website, I won't see the About drop-down. And I'm going to change my end level from all to level 1. In other words, just show me one level. And if I say save and I refresh the website, now I have no drop-downs. I have just my secondary navigation over here on the side. When I go to News and Information, that secondary information updates. And I have no drop-downs anywhere. So this is another way of presenting navigation on your website. This particular template, we've put it on the right side of the screen, but depending on what template you're working with, there might be a left column where you could put that navigation instead. And which approach is better? Well, it depends. It depends on the design for your website. It depends on your user interface. It depends on the kinds of users that you're working with. It depends on your personal preferences and your client preferences. But you now have two ways of displaying navigation on your website, whether you do it through drop-downs or whether you split up your navigation over two modules on the website. I'm going to go ahead and turn everything back on again to get my drop-downs back. And I'm actually going to unpublish that secondary navigation module because I'd rather stick with the drop-downs for this website. But now that I've walked you through it, that's the way that you get it done. So let me just walk you through how we're going to go back to having those drop-downs show up again. Here, once again, I'm in my main menu module. I'm going to go to my basic options, set my end level to all, show my submenu items and say save and close. And then for my sub-navigation, I'm simply going to unpublish it. And when I refresh my home page, now I've got my drop-downs back again. And when I go to, let's say, the executives page, I don't have that sub-navigation over here.